Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Vincent. I'm the president and CEO of the DC Chamber of Commerce. I want to welcome you all here to the Rise Center, where we plan to be a great workshop on opportunity zones and how opportunity zones can work with DC businesses and entrepreneurs. There are about 26 opportunity zones in the nation's capital, and basically for economic development and jobs in distressed areas. And so I don't want to steal anyone else's thunder. I'm just here to bring introductions and let them tell you all about the opportunities. But we're pleased to be here in partnership with the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development. I'd like to bring up Karima Woods. She's from the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development to bring greetings on behalf of the Deputy Mayor and really lay out what we're going to be doing here today.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Excellent, excellent. That's what I want to hear.
As Vincent mentioned, my name is Karima Woods. I'm the Director of Business Development and Strategy in the Deputy Mayor's Office for Planning and Economic Development. And on behalf of Deputy Mayor Kenner, I'm here to bring you greetings. We are here on the campus of St. Elizabeth's East Campus, home of the Entertainment and Sports Arena. So welcome to Commerce Heights. Thank you to the Wright Demonstration Center for hosting us. And thank you to the DC Chamber and team for the work that they've done with our team to put today's event together.
The Deputy Mayor's Office,
We are focused on three major goals. The Deputy Mayor talked about his goals, his jobs, quite extensively. One, affordable housing. Two, job creation and tax revenue generation. In my role, I'm primarily responsible for job creation and tax. Focusing on business attraction, retention across all key sector areas in the district. Opportunity zones. I'm pleased to be here with you all today to launch today's workshop on how opportunity zones can work for operating businesses. Some of you may be aware that opportunity zones were created in the 2017 Tax Cuts and Job Acts. The focus was around encouraging businesses, commercial projects to invest in underrepresented communities. The district has been heavily engaged in identifying a number of key census tracts that have been designated as opportunity zones. We have been, like many other jurisdictions across the country, taking cues from the federal government. This is a federal government incentive program, and it's important for our businesses to know that. This is not a program that is administered through the Deputy Mayor's Office, but it's very much administered through the federal government. And so they are in the process of proposing regulations around the Opportunity Zone programs. And for us, what that means is there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of uncertainty about this incentive program and how it will work. The Deputy Mayor just returned from the West Coast where he led a trade mission. We traveled to Los Angeles, Silicon Valley, San Francisco, and also Portland, Oregon. And in many of those meetings, there was one consistent question that came up over and over again, and that was a question around opportunity zones and what the district was thinking about as it relates to the opportunity. What are we planning to do? Are we planning to do anything? And so I think it's important for you to know that there are many jurisdictions across the country, that are also considering whether or not how this opportunity will work for the local community, for local businesses. And so in today's event, we're going to explore that in more detail. We'll have an opportunity to hear from some key experts. We're looking forward to continuing to inform and engage and educate the community around opportunity zones and the opportunity that it presents to our businesses. We have 25 census tracts here in the district. Our team was engaged in an extensive process where we collected data, we surveyed the community, we engaged the community to help us identify these key census tracts and the importance of them. And so today we'll hear a little bit more about that. Here east of the river, there are approximately 72% of the opportunity zones are located here east of the river, compared to 49.5% of all eligible tracts. The average unemployment rate in our opportunity zones is 22.2%, and the average poverty rate is 32.2%. The commercial density of our design or designated tracts is over 20% compared to 16.3% of all eligible tracts. So I wanted to share that information with you as we prepare to hear from our panelists and our experts today. Without further ado, I would like to turn things over to our expert who's going to provide an overview on opportunity zones, Christopher Lee.
And I will endeavor to do my best to make the next 10 minutes about tax law as riveting as is possible for everyone in the room here on a morning mission here. So maybe I do that.
Provide some context behind the Opportunity Zone initiative. This idea originated in academia, actually about 5 years ago, to address the problem of inequitable growth across the country. It's a persistent problem. We all are familiar with it. Some statistics on the screen that presented why.
There's more than 50 million people across the country that live in economically distressed areas. 3/4 of job growth are coming from very narrowly defined, metropolitan areas across the country. And 67% of job growth is coming from small businesses, which are increasingly find it more difficult to attract capital. And so the idea was really to get capital flowing to these underserved areas and create jobs across the country. Fast forward to 2017, we have the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act passed, tax reform. It's a 1,000-page document, and 5 pages within that document did 3 things. It created the opportunity zones, it created qualified opportunity funds, which are the mechanism through which you invest in opportunity zones, and it outlined the tax benefits for doing all that. And we'll take those 3 things in sequence over the next 7 or 8 minutes. So what is an opportunity zone? It's a census tract that has been designated by the state, in our case the city, or the territory, to be eligible for investment by opportunity funds. And it has been certified by the Treasury Department federally. Now, to be eligible, these census tracts had to meet the definition of a low-income community, or it had to be a contiguous area to a low-income community, provided that that contiguous area did not have a median income greater than 125% of the low-income community. So you can't have Beverly Hills next to a poor neighborhood and have both of those things qualify. That was not an eligibility criteria. And once designated, you get a 10-year designation for that census tract. So up until 2028, investment can flow into these areas and get the tax benefits. On the back end, you can hold investments for a lot longer than that, but the money has to go into the zone before these designations expire in 2028. Across the country, there are about 8,700 zones that have been designated across all states. So we have a full kind of national endorsement of this program. And so across the country, I won't spend too much time on this, but there are urban, there are rural, there's a whole host of opportunities out there, and I encourage everyone to go to the CDFI Fund website at the Treasury Department if you're interested in the full listing of these 8,700 tracts.
Within our city, as I mentioned, I think your graphic and the chair better than mine, so you get more details on our zones, but there is a concentration in the south and in the east. So now that we know what the zones are, economically distressed areas that have been designated by Treasury, well, how do you invest in them? And that's through the Qualified Opportunity Fund that's laid out here. Now, these are new investment vehicles that are set up either as partnerships or corporations for the purpose of investing in the zones. Now, there are a number of different structural criteria that you need to meet in order to be eligible. And this is where that first round of regulations, the 75 pages that qualified the first 5 pages of the law, really come into play. So the eligibility criteria are outlined on this slide here. First, the money going into these funds have to be from realized capital gains. So someone has to either sell a building, sell some Apple stock, sell some capital asset and use the gain on that sale and invest it in a fund in order for it to be eligible. Second, the time between that realization and the money going into the fund is 180 days or less. So you basically have 6 months from the point at which you sell and create your gain to invest in the fund. So there's a real time constraint. Thirdly, it relates to location. And there's been some heavy debate on interpretation of this. But you see, if the fund is going to own assets directly, think buildings and physical property, 90% of the money that it has must be invested in the zones. Now, funds can invest in property indirectly by buying a stake in a business, and that business would own assets in zones. And if that's the case, if it's indirect ownership, the Qualified Opportunity Fund has to own 70% of its assets in the zones. So there is a distinction between owning real estate directly and owning property through a business.
Now that ratio is going to be tested every 6 months. You have to maintain that ratio in the zones on a 6-month period for the duration of the fund. In terms of what's eligible for investments, it's a very broad and open definition. Again, the Treasury website lists exclusions that they're calling sin businesses, quote unquote, and that would be alcohol, tobacco, sales, gambling, massage parlors, but it's a fairly limited list of things that you can't invest in. So real estate, infrastructure, operating companies, it's wide open in terms of what is out there. But there is a key distinction between something that already exists and something that you're going to create from scratch. If you're going to invest in a building that exists or a company that exists, you're subject to what they call an improvement test. So if I buy a building in the zone for $100, over the next 31 months, I have to invest another $100 to improve that building or that business. The idea being, they didn't want people, buying distressed assets and not improving them, not upgrading the communities. Now, if you're going to start a business in a zone, you're not subject to that test. The theory there being, if you're creating something from scratch, you're by definition improving it so you can satisfy things on that basis. Lastly, these are self-certifying vehicles. The fund manager is going to self-certify via their IRS tax returns that they're meeting these requirements, and it's fairly simple. The tax return forms are getting simpler, theoretically, and this is a 2-page form that they would attach. As I mentioned, these features are still heavily kind of being structured through future IRS guidance, and we expect more guidance to be coming out from the IRS over the coming months to help clarify these and other issues. So now we know what zones are, we know what funds are, what are the benefits of actually going through all this? And that's up on the page here. So on the right side, I think we maybe just walk through an example and see how the 3 benefits that are on offer really come into play. So let's say you own Apple stock. You bought it at the right time, you got a big gain, say a $100 gain or what have you. Simple math. In 2018, you realize your gain, and within the next 6 months, you put that $100 into a qualified opportunity fund. That's going to trigger your first benefit, and then a deferral of capital gains tax that you would have owed on that $100, which is shown in bullet point 1 up there. That deferral will last until you sell your investment in that qualified opportunity fund, or 2026, whichever is sooner, so you get a time value of money benefit. Now let's say that you hold your investment in the qualified opportunity fund until 2023, a 5-year holding period. That triggers a second benefit. The $100 that you would need to pay tax on, it introduced in the IRS $90. So there's a 10% discount effectively to that in a value of the deferral. If you hold it until 2025, basically a 7-year investment, that $100 gain that you owed taxes on originally in the IRS becomes $85. There's a 15% discount for holding the investment for 7 years. Now, the benefit that most people are focused on is this third one down here, which is if you hold this investment for more than 10 years, all the gains created by the fund itself are not subject to federal capital gains taxes. So if you put $100 in to this qualified opportunity fund and created $1,000, the $900 gain that you made is not subject to federal capital gains taxes. So it really incentivizes growth and growth investments. Now, I know that we're going to cover this in some of the panels, but I did want to raise a few key features on the business side before jumping into the panels. Now, these things are still very much in flux with additional guidance forthcoming, but should give you a sense of some of the decisions business owners will have to make if accepting opportunities on capital.
The first is around this revenue test. As it stands now, 50% of a business must generate, revenue must be generated from active conduct in the zones. There are two requirements there. Active conduct, meaning real economic activity. The idea is not that you buy our storage unit and hope that something happens after 10 years. They want you trading actively with the community. The second bit, in the zones, was actually not in the original legislation. It was added by the IRS in the guidance process, and that is something that's heavily under consideration right now from both Congress, the investment and business community. The implication being you're going to be limited to how fast and where you can grow, which doesn't help many people. So the second bit in the zones may actually be reversed in the next round of guidance, as it stands right now, though you're subject to it. Okay. The second issue for consideration is the tangible asset test. Remember we talked about when we own assets directly, 90% must be in the zones versus the business indirectly, you have 70% in the zones. Well, if you're a business, over the course of a relationship with an investor, if they're an opportunity zone investor, they're going to want you to keep 70% of your assets in the zone. And if you identify a great growth opportunity outside the zone that messes with that calculation, that could be a tension between you and your investor. It could be a strategic consideration whether your tax benefits are worth more than the growth outside the zone. So think through those sorts of issues. The third issue here, which I probably related is really about related party issues. What they try to do is avoid self-dealing, selling to yourself, and creating artificial capital gains to avoid taxes. And in doing so, they put in a provision that says tangible property of the Qualified Opportunity Fund must have been acquired after 2017 and from an unrelated party, meaning ownership of less than 20%. So if you accept opportunities on capital, there's a possibility that you need to dilute yourself down to 20% to prove that you're not a related party to that fund. There are ways around that, and every situation is different, but broadly speaking, that's a risk to consider. And the last issue here to flag up front is around operating losses. As many of you know, they inserted what's called a working capital safe harbor in the regulations that really addresses how you hold and use your cash over the course of an investment, realizing that money flows in and out just throughout one time necessarily. And what they did is they say, we recognize that issue, and so long as you're using your working capital for the acquisition, construction, or improvement of tangible property, you're in the safe zone. What that doesn't do is help companies necessarily that are funding their operating losses by through equity, or that are primarily funding people's salaries to build software, what have you. People are not tangible assets or tangible properties that run afoul of the guidance here. And so I know we're going to talk about this more in depth on the panels, but some of these considerations are kind of up front, some of the headline issues that are out in the tax community as up for consideration.
We're going to go ahead and get started. So, as I mentioned before, the bios are in the back. We have an impressive panel of business owners here. And one of the things that I certainly want to thank the Deputy Mayor's Office for is, if you look at the title of the program today, it's How Can Opportunity Zones Work for DC Entrepreneurs and Operating Businesses? So we want to make sure that we're not just hearing an investor's perspective, that we're not just hearing about opportunity zones and opportunity funds, but making sure that we hear directly from business owners. Now, what we have in here today, assumably we can categorize most of you in a couple categories, right? Either you're an investor, you're a business owner or want to find out more, or you're someone here in the ecosystem who want to try to facilitate the flow of capital and opportunity. And I think that's safe. So what we want to make sure today, we have three wonderful business owners here, all representing very different industries, having very different perspectives, having challenges, but also not charity cases. These are some bona fide, awesome business owners here who've had growth, who've done a stellar job of creating something from nothing. And so, with that in mind, I'd like to kick this over. So, for each of you, let's start out. I will toss up a softball. I know the caffeine is still flowing through the system. And we're going to open this up for questions as well a little later. So just tell us a little bit about your business. We want to get behind the business so they can read about the focus of the company here, but let's start out with a little bit of what your pathway has been to get to where you are now.
Sure. Harold, what do you mean challenges? There's no such thing as challenges when you're running a business. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rahama Wright. I am a social impact entrepreneur. I started a business after serving in the Peace Corps, and what my company does, we basically butter people up. That's what I do. So I create high-quality, natural, organic shea butter products, ethically sourcing from women's cooperatives in northern Ghana. And so I find myself in the rare kind of category of entrepreneurs that create product-based businesses. I think you very rarely hear a lot from us, so thank you, Harold, for the invitation to participate, because as a product-based business, there are a lot of interesting challenges that I have to navigate. And so when I created my business over 10 years ago, I did not have access to a lot of resources. I had never taken a business class. I knew nothing about a profit and loss statement, a balance sheet. I had very little capital. I had just returned back to the US after serving in the Peace Corps. You don't get paid when you serve in the Peace Corps. You get a readjustment allowance of about, at the time, I think it was $5,000 or $6,000. I moved to DC. I had to get an apartment. I had to figure out work. And I had this idea to create the social impact business. And so over the last decade plus, I've been able to navigate the entire cycle of supply chain management, product development. I've gotten my first seed round of funding from the Pan-African Investment Company, which is funded by Ron Lauder, Veste Lauder, and Dick Parsons, the former head of Pettigrew and Time Warner. I've gotten my products into Whole Foods, and then 2 years ago was able to create a line extension and get my products into MGM Resorts. So this is actually one of the products that we sell that they use in their spa. And so I have pretty much gone up and down that roller coaster ride of entrepreneurship. And I don't know if you just want us to just do the brief intro first and intro first. Okay, so I look forward to just kind of delving in a little bit into kind of some of the sticking points and challenges I've had over the last few years. And operationally, we work with 14 villages in northern Ghana. There are 800 women within our supply chain. We have 3 people that work with us in the DC office. We have 3 staff in northern Ghana as well. Some of my advisors include a C-suite executive from Hershey's, a former regional buyer in the beauty department at Whole Foods is on my advisory board, and a former CSR professional at Estee Lauder is also on my advisory board. So I'll stop there.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone. My name is Fonta, Gilliam, CEO and founder of Invest Susu. We are a financial technology fintech company based here in Anacostia. Offices on MLK. Before launching Susu, I worked as a diplomat, an American diplomat for 10 years. So I lived in East Asia, Africa, did a little work in the Middle East. During that time, I was kind of tasked with developing innovative financial models and tools for foreign businesses that wanted to work in the US, and vice versa. And that really was the impetus of what started me to launch Susu. I came back to the United States. I worked as a management consultant for Deloitte. We bought a house up the street on W Street here in Anacostia, and I was looking around my neighborhood, and I was like, a lot of the programs and innovative technologies that we were deploying abroad, we need to be doing here at home. And that's really what launched our company. We got our initial investment from a social impact fund called Equity Green. And essentially what we do is really focus on addressing the reality that 78% of Americans are paycheck to paycheck, 40% of us struggle with below average credit and don't have $400 in savings if we had to. And so we've developed a smart social banking account to help banks service those customers that need financial support. We use AI and blockchain to facilitate that process, to help people save, build strong credit, and invest with peers at their local community bank. And I guess I'll kind of wrap up with, okay, sorry, can you hear me now? All right, I won't do that spiel again, but I guess what I'll do is I'll wrap up and saying, we are a proud fintech company, proud to be based here in Ward 8, and I'm very excited about the interest in kind of investing in this ward. We were able to attract some initial investment from the Independent Community Bankers Association, which has been an incredible kind of boon for us and signal to the markets in terms of what we're doing and product market fit. And I look forward to talking with you more about our challenges and opportunities.
Good morning, Robert Kinsler, founder, CEO of United Fray. There was a map earlier. Edgewood is an opportunity zone. It's where I started my business about 9.5 years ago in my one-room apartment. Our office is now in the Brentwood area, which is also an opportunity zone. We have 20 plus full-time team members. We believe that play and joy has the power to transform lives. And so our mission is to make fun possible. And we do that by creating and sharing fun things to do here in the district and also in a few other markets across the country.
I'm gonna try. All right, I was trying to make this work. So let's do this, and I'll just pass it back and forth.
I'll just pass the mic back and forth. So let's talk a little bit about, you've heard the companies, you haven't had a chance to introduce your companies. Let's talk a little bit about what growth has meant for each of your respective companies, because they represent very different industries. And growth in the context of the challenges you've had with accessing capital to fuel your growth. Let's take it back here.
Access to capital didn't exist for me probably for the first 5 or 6 years. It was all bootstrapped, just figuring out how to make it work with gum and tape. Somewhere along the way, we started to generate enough revenue that we were able to do some of the more traditional lines of capital, credit card, line of credit, things of that nature. Most of our acquisitions have still been bootstrapped though. Most recently, we have formed some relationships with some local banks here in the DC community, and we've funded a few of our acquisition opportunities. I still just recently made one though with my own dollars again, because bankers don't always have the same faith that you do. So capital has been an interesting relationship for us over the years, but luckily we're in a business that is not quite dependent on long terms. We've paid up front for most of the things that we do, so that's made it a little bit of an easier road. We don't have to finance the production of the product, things of that nature. But some of our larger opportunities now have required funding. And luckily we've built relationships, and for me the key was building the relationship before I needed it. So getting that first loan for one of the acquisitions that we did, I actually didn't need the funds, but I knew that I wanted to establish the relationship. And so we paid the 4 or 5% that we had to do to pay the piper, and we've gone from there. So.
Yeah, I mean, raising capital as an early stage company or startup is super difficult. And you guys probably have heard the stats. If you are a woman or a minority, it's even more difficult. And I would say that we've seen our fair share of that. To kind of counteract that, what we focused on was bootstrapping as well. So a lot of co-founder contributions, some small friends and family, but that gets exhausted quick. And then also pivoting more towards grants and government contracts. Because of my background as a diplomat and my work in the federal government, that was a huge help in helping us to kind of generate revenue to build the technology behind the company. For a lot of fintech companies or technology companies, I would say, can't oftentimes go to a bank because you might not have the kind of revenue and MRR they're looking for up front because you're building technology that's new. And so we had to figure out creative ways to attract grants and non-investor, non-bank kind of capital to bootstrap that. As well as to attract talent. And I think that now as we're kind of beginning to see traction in the market, and we have a lot of banks that are interested in licensing our software, the investors have become more interested. But I do think that there is also been a challenge around geography. Certain addresses are sexier than others, no matter where you are. And we decided to stay true to our address because this is where the people are that we're trying to help. But I think that sometimes that sacrifice can come with some stereotypes, and that we've had to work hard to dispel those, by showcasing our talent and our technology and how amazing it is. But it hasn't been easy to do that.
Bootstrapping, yes. I think that we all have to start there, and I didn't get my first round of capital until about 7.5, 8 years into developing Shea. And so in the beginning, I worked odd jobs here and there. I got money from my family, from my friends. And I think for me, I was very ill prepared for getting my first round of capital from a venture capital fund. And I did not grow up in the world of finance. I didn't study it, I wanted to work at the American embassies around the world. I wanted to become a foreign service officer. I studied international affairs. And so when I got into Whole Foods and I realized that, starting in 7 stores, I wanted to grow to a couple handfuls, 26 stores. They were going to expand us into the North Atlantic region. And I just did not have enough capital for inventory. And I had to start looking for ways of funding Shea. My dad was not going to be giving me any more money. And so I had to tap that out. And so I had to really think about, how to position myself to be able to attract capital. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of relationships, as you had mentioned. I got introduced to the head of the Pan-African Investment Company. Their investment thesis was very specific to working with social entrepreneurs in Africa, doing business in Africa. And so Shea really fit that. And after meeting the CEO, I went through a 9-month due diligence process before I was able to get my seed round. And between family and friends round, bootstrapping, and my first seed round, I raised over $1 million for Shea. And I would say if I could do it all over again, I probably would have one. The second thing would be understanding the different ways to structure an investment into my business, because these were things that I really didn't have any experience in. It wasn't until after the seed round that I realized that I probably could have taken that path a little bit differently. And this is where I want to emphasize not just access to capital, but access to smart capital. And I was fortunate enough to be part of the Wake Accelerator program at Ascend, and I really wish I had participated in that prior to getting my first round of funding, because I was able to, when you're an entrepreneur, you just have a dream. You're like, I want to do this, I want to create impact, and I think when you're a social entrepreneur, it's even more difficult because you bake into your business model a social impact. It's not just about buying and selling something and making money, it's about changing a social issue. And so for me, I was really driven by the social issue, but now I'm sitting at the table with folks who are like profitability, returns, and what are your costs? When are you gonna break even? All of that stuff. So it was very difficult to navigate that. And I think having access to certain programs that can walk entrepreneurs through that process is really important. And so I really want to emphasize the importance of smart capital. And in terms of growth as well, I launched in one region of Whole Foods in 7 stores, and then about 4.5 months later, they launched us region-wide, and then about a year later, I got into my 2nd region, and a few months after that, got into my 3rd region. And then I recognized that although Whole Foods is amazing for launching a product-based business, it's really hard for the type of business I have, because most people go to Whole Foods for food. They're not necessarily going to Whole Foods to get buttered up. So I had to, 3 years in, really think about channel and how to pivot and look at a different channel that would be very focused on beauty. And this is where I got an opportunity to pitch and eventually get into MGM Resorts, which has been fantastic for my business. And I would just say, as part of that growth trajectory, is really leveraging supplier diversity programs. And I would not be sitting here with the accounts I have if I had not worked really hard to develop businesses with supplier diversity directors, getting my business certified, and then pitching, stalking people to get Shea into the doors that we're currently in.
Awesome. And so let's work through a 2-part question. So next we have a panel of folks who will talk about their perspectives as investors. So I'm gonna toss another question out. Fonta, I'm gonna start with you, just so you know. First, what's your reaction to what Chris presented a little earlier around, and just what your knowledge is overall of opportunity zones? And second, because we know we have some investors in here who raise a couple $1 million, maybe a couple multiples of a couple $1 million. You have a number of entrepreneurs here who are in the room as well. There'll be investment opportunities. If you had $1 million,
I do too.
if you had $2 million, what type of investments would you make in your company from a growth, to further accelerate your growth? Let's stop there. Now I'll toss it to you, Fonta.
So first, I guess my impressions of the program. At first I was really excited,
At first.
and I'll be very candid on this panel because, that's the point, right? 3 talking points in the paper. But very excited at first. Seems like it could, I think it will be a great way to leverage capital in these kind of traditionally kind of underserved, underdeveloped communities. But as a homeowner here in this community, as a business owner, and one of the opportunities in the community, I am a bit concerned. And this is me speaking as well as colleagues, neighbors, fellow business owners in the area. Gentrification has been a problem in many large cities around the country. And, the prospect of people being kind of pushed out because they can no longer afford what investors are building in terms of housing and shopping and that kind of thing is a real fear. And not just with me, but with a lot of folks that live in these areas. The second concern was really around, is it just a real estate play? Which, we know real estate is great. It's an incredible investment vehicle. It's a smart tool to invest and build wealth. But it's also very kind of exclusive in many ways. And it doesn't really do a lot of small business development. And small businesses are what power the country. We're the highest employers in the country. We drive technology. And so if all of this money is being directed towards investments that don't include small businesses, that'll be unfortunate. So that was kind of my initial take on the program. And I'm really looking forward to what the federal government comes up with in terms of policy updates. I'm excited about what the city is doing to include people like us in this panel. And I know I've heard of a lot of other panels, and many of them don't include small businesses at all, which is unfortunate. So I think that was very strategic and visionary on the city's part. Now, in terms of what I would invest $2 million in, SUSE is a fintech company, and I think that presents 2 opportunities for investors. One, there's obviously a real estate play because we're local, and there's a lot of property here, abandoned buildings. We spend a lot of money on a commercial lease. Might make sense for us to stop leasing and own and run our operations out of a building that we own, right? And build assets for the business that way. But I think also, investing in a tech company, can be really smart addition to investing in a real estate play in a zone. Why? We offer 7-10x returns for our investors in 3 to 5 years if you do it right. That's an incredible advantage on top of having real estate, having property in an opportunity zone. And so I think that's something to think about as you look for projects in this area is, how can I not only invest in property in this region, but also attach myself to a technology company, for example, that's highly scalable. Our company, so if I were to take $2 million, I would invest in 2 things. Technology upgrades, as well as our sales team. Like I mentioned before, we just got a really exciting investment from a Community Bankers Association of 3,000 banks across the country. And so we're in the process of selling to all other member banks right now. We're getting incredible interest. And so having the kind of funding that we need to support a sales team that can help us go to market faster and more states would be incredible. So that's what I would focus on. And then, some property.
Initial reaction, I laughed when he mentioned it was born in academia, because it definitely seems overly complicated. Deeper reactions, and from researching it and reading about it prior to today as well, is really understanding what the tool is meant to be used for. And as a small business owner, that's also very entrepreneurial. One of the ways we've grown, we've done, I think, 9 acquisitions to this point. I'm looking at it both as an investor, entrepreneur, as I am a business owner and trying to grow my business. And so trying to reconcile where this tool may live in that ecosystem, right? Is it a tool for me to help grow my main business? Is it a tool potentially for me to put my investor hat on? Is there a way to bridge both of those gaps together? So those were some of my initial reactions, thinking through what the tools were for. Some of the more detailed elements of the slide around growth happening in zones. Okay, okay, what does that actually mean? Does that mean that our product has to be sold in the zone? Does it mean our service has to only be in the zone? So things of that nature, truly understanding it, because you don't want to go too far down the road with an expectation that you're going to be able to take advantage of it and then find out that that one checkbox you just can't check. So more questions are raised for me. In terms of what I would do with $1 million or $2 million, the sharing side of our mission, so creating and sharing fun things to do. The creating is how most people know us. It's our sports leagues, it's the events that we run in the market, it's the events that we produce for other companies. That's where we touch the bulk of our people. The sharing we started about a year ago, and by sharing I mean media and content around great things to do. So it's not just us producing awesome fun activities in the city or surrounding area. There's lots of other producers and fun content that we can produce to bring to our community. And so that sharing side is really a media play, and media is expensive. And so we're looking at how can we move in that space as an underdog. You hear about Vox and BuzzFeed and Mike and all these major national digital media brands laying people off. You hear of Patch and AOL trying to do local media. So a lot of that is a top-down attempt to do media. We're looking at the bottom up. How do you do local media by a local media producer? And so I would use the investments in key areas in that space of our business, the media and growth. And potentially look at buying our building as well. We're on a 13-year lease. Is that an opportunity? Am I a related party? I don't know. There's so many questions. But somewhere in those two areas is where we spend the money.
So I crashed this panel because I don't currently operate my business in an opportunity zone, but I'm very interested in moving into an opportunity zone. And part of my next round of fundraise would be to assist me in developing a manufacturing and warehousing facility where I could do fulfillment, because right now part of my operations is outsourcing that for the larger accounts that we have. And so I was really excited to hear the first presentation, because I honestly knew nothing about opportunity zones, and this is kind of my first introduction to them. But I see that it could potentially be really beneficial for a manufacturing company, and you don't see a lot of manufacturing companies in DC. And I would be really excited to not only manufacture for my brand in line, but also use this for other beauty entrepreneurs in DC, and there are a few, to kind of leverage working together to become their co-packer and help them with warehousing and fulfillment as well. So, you know, if you think about utilizing, being able to figure out a way to get like investor funding, grant funding to set up something like that, it's not only going to be positive for Yeleen, but it'll be positive for other businesses in the DC area. For warehousing, I have to go out to Virginia, different parts of Maryland. But what if I could do that here and do fulfillment here as well? In terms of where I want to invest in other areas of the business is, of course, we are currently a direct vendor to all of our outlets that we sell to. And I want to move towards having relationships with distributors who can help me scale from being in a few hundred stores to several thousand stores. So this is kind of, for growing to that, I need investments into be able to get my inventory up, into product innovation. When I launched Yeleen, nobody was talking about social impact in terms of the supply chain for shea butter. And now it's like something that a lot of different brands are doing. And so where I see us adding further value is not only our social impact, but our brand positioning in terms of product innovation with the products that we bring to market. So those are all of the areas that I need $2 million for. So if anyone wants to raise their hand and let me know where I can chat with you after this, I'd be really happy.
We got a couple hands in the back there. We got 1 million, 2 million. Okay. All right. That's right. All right. So we got a couple minutes left for the panel. I'll just mention really quickly. Rahama mentioned one of the programs that we have, Wake-If. We're local CDFI, about $6 million under management assets. We do lending, we do advisory services to help business owners through that difficult journey of entrepreneurship and growing and scaling businesses. That's my really quick plug. Talk to you later. Let's open it up. Let's see if you have any questions. What we got right there? I saw your hand first.
I'm curious as to...
I'll repeat the question so you can.
So, I'm curious as to the number of employees that you have. I believe you said 20 plus in your operation as well as...
Three here and three in college.
Okay, I'm primarily concerned about here.
Yep.
3 here and how many?
We have 3 here as well, and then
Of the 26, how many of them are DC residents?
So the question is around employment of the companies here in the size.
Okay, and in connection with DC Wright?
I'm not sure how many are DC residents. We just made an acquisition 2 weeks ago, so that jumps us up. I'd have to pull our records. I know a pretty healthy amount. I was up until just recently, and a good chunk of the team, but I don't know the exact number. Is it about qualifying for a certain program, or?
No, I'm concerned about the flood of money that will come to opportunity zones, not just the ones here, but, you know, across the country, and sort of like pursuing, chasing low-cost real estate for development of businesses and or residential units, and whether or not there is a requirement. We have inclusionary zoning here doing residential development, but making sure that there are affordable housing available, and thinking that maybe there should be an effort to divide the number of affordable housing units to produce to not just the number of residential units you build and construct, but also the number of jobs created. Because if you create jobs without adjusting for the affordable housing units, you'll still force communities out of their neighborhood into.
So really quickly, that's a great question, and I would suggest that is for the next panel. Because those are going to be the folks who are actually creating the funds. Yeah, no, so it's a great question. And I think it's one that's top of concern for many of us. Chad, what you got?
Hi, Chad Johnson, I just need to take on this. To be kind of areas that I'm in the process of create custom conventions and churches and operations also. So on my board, my office, we also have a registered e-commerce business that we plan to launch later on this year. My reason for being here is that my headquarters is in Wuhan. I married into it. But I don't want to be Wuhan anymore because I think about the e-commerce side in that I want to be try to advocate for the community. I want to use the community and space that I'm here. So I want to get that time process. How long I've been there for 4 years. How long we're doing having the age of the side, and I don't want to increase going with the e-commerce side, so like that. Warehousing and stuff like that. How long do you think that it should take to move out to the
Did everyone hear the question? The question was around business strategy. And Chadwick has a company in DuPont and was asking, and has an e-commerce company, and asking about the timing and strategy around moving from DuPont, presumably into an impact opportunity zone area.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting question. I have 2 thoughts on it. One of the challenges here in Wright is that we don't have a lot of office space or co-working space. I was really challenged to find something local so that I didn't have to drive 20, 30 minutes away from my house and my daughter's school, right? And so when we think about, that's something to think about, casing around where are the areas, and for investors, I think that's an opportunity, like huge. The other thing I was going to say is it hasn't been easy to identify opportunity zone investors. And so if I were you, I would be strategic around, if, I don't know what your kind of your capital looks like, but I would be strategic around identifying, where are these people? Who are they? How do I talk to them? And trying to tee that up front so you kind of have, that you'll be able to bring them with you when you come, because it's been very difficult to find them locally. And I guess that's probably another pain point that I just would like to throw out. If there's a way to, I don't know, have some kind of website where you can kind of connect businesses to investors, or I had some kind of certification from the city to say, hey, I'm an opportunity zone business opportunity. Something like that, I think would help your efforts.
I just wanted to add that you just said that we can also starting a bond where we can have cities like you kind of share
And keep in mind, and you saw this a little earlier with the presentation, but I'm sure as the next panelist, I won't say expert, because there's a lot still left to be figured out. So I challenge anyone that says they're an expert in this, other than Rachel, rather than Carol. But for everyone else, there's a lot to be figured out. What we got over here? There's some time constraints on investment, so there is some immediacy around making decisions and connections. Let's go over here to the side of the room.
Hi, I do have an all-natural body care company, and I do work with Ghanaian women who make my products as well. I looked into the Whole Foods as well as other retailers, and I found that the margin that they wanted didn't make my business profitable. So did you find that opening and being in additional stores boost your business once you're able to go into three markets or the one market?
Yeah, so I negotiated my margins, and this is with any buyer, you can negotiate. Yes, they'll say they want 50 or more % margin, but you can negotiate that. And I was able to negotiate that based on a couple of things. One, of course, looking at my costs and what I needed to get in order for it to be sustainable for me. And I was able to negotiate low 40s to mid 40s in terms of margin. So I would recommend negotiating anytime. Even I negotiate my terms in terms of my payment terms, because one of the challenges when you run a product-based business is getting paid. I'm sure with services too, but you know, a lot of places want to give you net 30, net 60. You can always negotiate that. And I really leverage the fact that I'm a woman-owned, minority-owned, certified business, and the fact that a lot of these larger companies, they do want to be showing that they're supporting businesses who historically have not been able to get shelf space. And so I would advise you, I'm happy to chat with you after on some of the tactics that I've used to make sure that I can be financially viable by having a wholesale business and working with my wholesale retailers. I also do sell through e-commerce, and I also do direct to consumer as well, but the majority of my business is through my wholesale accounts.